Now, to make this wild blueberry wine, I'm going to need 4 pounds of wild blueberries. Now, of course, you can use regular blueberries, you can use fresh, frozen, organic, or in this case, wild blueberries. Now, as a disclaimer, I need to point out the fact that no, I did not wander across some field and stumble across a patch of wild blueberries growing and just help myself to 4 pounds of them. I, like most people, are going to buy them at the grocery store. Now then, how do I know that these are wild blueberries? It's simple. It says so right here on the package. I take it as face value. What reason would they have to lie? Now then, next, I'm going to be using 4.5 cups of sugar. It's plain white granulated sugar will do. I'm going to need 1 black tea bag. Now, the black tea is going to act as our tannin substitute, which, of course, if you don't know, is going to provide a little bit of astringency to our wine. I'm going to be using the juice of 1/4 of a lemon, and the lemon is going to be acting as our acid blend substitute, which, of course, is going to add a little bit of brightness and acidity to our wine. This time around, I'm going to be using a Red Star Premier Rouge wine yeast for no particular reason other than the fact that I just happen to have a lot of it. Got to start using this stuff up. Now, if you don't have wine yeast, bread yeast still works. Speaking of bread yeast, we're going to be using anywhere from 1/2 to 1/4 of a teaspoon of bread yeast, and the bread yeast is going to act as a yeast nutrient to feed our wine yeast later on. It would be helpful if you had a couple of straining bags to hold our blueberries. Again, it's optional. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. I'm going to need 1 gallon of clean filtered water. I'm going to need a wide mouth fermenter to do our primary fermentation in, and it's helpful because having a wide mouth means that we can get our straining bags into it and out of it when necessary. Now, if you don't have that kind of fermenter, a standard food grade bucket will also serve the same purpose. Now, in about a week's time, when our blueberries have done their all to make our wine, we're going to transfer our liquid from our primary fermenter into our secondary carboy. This happens to be a 4-liter carboy. You can use a 1 gallon if that's what you have. Now, you're going to need an airlock with bung. This particular bung is a number 6 bung, which fits most 1 gallon and 4-liter carboys quite nicely. Again, you'll also need an airlock for your primary fermenter, but seeing as how this particular model does have its own built-in airlock, I won't need a bubbler type airlock for that. Now, of course, it would be helpful if you had a hydrometer handy, which will allow you to determine your starting gravity, which is used later on when you've got your ending gravity, to determine how much alcohol you have made in your wine. Also, in case something goes wrong, this lets you know that things aren't moving as they should, and you can probably take steps to correct that. I'm going to need a good-sized pot with a lid. This is an 8-quart pot, or something larger might be preferable to hold all of our blueberries while they're on the stove. It would be helpful if you had a hydrometer with testing tube to help determine what our starting gravity or how much sugar is initially in our wine, and at the end of the process, how much sugar is no longer in our wine to help us determine how much alcohol we have produced in our wine. Now, of course, this is optional. Now, of course, as always, all of our equipment is going to be properly cleaned and sanitized using your favorite food grade sanitizer of choice, whether it's One Step or Star San or something equivalent. Just follow the manufacturer's instructions and make sure your equipment is clean enough so that you will not have any issues with bacteria or whatever later on. And that is what I'm going to be using to make this wine. Now, if your berries have been previously frozen, you might want to go ahead and thaw those out. And I'm going to use a colander to quickly rinse my blueberries. And let those drain just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and return these back to the pan. Getting as many of the berries in the pan as possible. Now, for those of you with straining bags, let's go ahead and get our berries into the bags. And let's go ahead and tie these off. Let's go ahead and add in about half of our water. Okay, well, maybe a little bit more than half. Doesn't really matter. We just want enough in there to mostly cover our straining bags. We'll put the lid back on, and I want to bring this up to a boil. Now that our water has come up to a good rolling boil, we're going to go ahead and add in half a teaspoon of our bread yeast. And the reason for this is that we want to heat to kill off the bread yeast so that it will act as a yeast nutrient for our fermentation yeast, whether it's going to be wine yeast or another sample of bread yeast. With that having been done, we can actually go ahead and turn off the heat. Don't need that anymore. And we can go ahead and add in our straining bags. The purpose of doing this is not to cook the fruit, but to kill off any wild yeast and, to some degree, harmful bacteria that might have been clinging on to the outsides of the blueberries. Now, with that having been done, we're going to go ahead and take our black tea bag with no strings or labels and go ahead and drop that in. Again, the tea bag is going to be acting as our tannin substitute, which is going to add a little astringency to the wine later on. Put our lid back on, and we want to let the temperature come down just a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and add in our sugar. Now that our wine is cooled down a little bit, we'll just go ahead and incorporate our sugar while it's still hot to help it dissolve that much faster. And stir it in. Being careful not to destroy our tea bag because we don't want a lot of loose tea leaves floating around there that we got to deal with later on. And you can squeeze down it on the blueberries a little bit. And put our lid back on and let that come down to room temperature. Now that our blueberry juice mixture has cooled down to room temperature, actually I just let it sit out overnight, I now want to transfer everything from the pot to the fermenter. Well, everything except that tea bag that's floating around in there. First thing I want to do, I'm going to mash down on these berries one last time. Nice and good. And then I'm going to temporarily remove these straining bags. There we go. And yes, my hands have been sanitized, as has been the fermenter, as has been this spoon, as has been this bowl that I'm going to use, and as has been my strainer that I'm going to use shortly. So move that. And somewhere in there is a tea bag. There it is. Just go ahead and remove that. And now I want to transfer everything into the fermenter. Now the fermenter has got levels for gallon, gallon and a half, 2 gallons, 2.5 gallons, and so forth. And the reason why I took out the bags is because I want to get a good reading on how much juice is actually in there. And that water that we saved from yesterday, we can now go ahead and add that in, bring our level up to where we want it to be, which means about a gallon. And with that having been done, through a little swirl, we can now do the following. We can go ahead and add in our acid blend substitute, which was a quarter of a slice of lemon, using a strainer because I don't really want any seeds in there. All it takes is a good squeeze. I mean, you don't have to scrape off the sides or anything. Cut off to the side. And we can now go ahead and return our berries back into the fermenter, along with any potential blueberry wine to be as well. For a moment, put our cover back on. And let me clean this mess up a little bit. Now, for those of you following at home with hydrometers, we'll go ahead and take our initial hydrometer reading. Let us know just how much sugar we're starting out with. And it looks like our initial hydrometer reading is coming in at 1.090. Let's take the opportunity to go ahead and give our juice mixture one last good vigorous stir. Let's go ahead and aerate this as much as possible. Reason being is that our yeast, although it does need sugar, it also needs oxygen, at least initially. And with that having been done, we're going to go ahead and add in about a half a teaspoon of our yeast, of our wine yeast. Now again, if you don't have wine yeast, you still got bread yeast. It will also work. And spread that around somewhat evenly. You want to aerate or bloom your yeast, please feel free. I happen to have success just sprinkling it on. Put my lid back on nice and tight. And I should point out that this fermenter does have a built-in airlock. You don't have one who's put a built-in airlock, you're going to need one of these, all right? Now we do need to label our creation so we know what it is we're making later on down the road. We are making a blueberry wine. We started it on this date, and our starting gravity was 1.090. Well, now that we've started making our blueberry wine, what do we do next? Well, for the next 5 to 7 days, we want to put this someplace where it's nice, cool, and dark. After that time, we want to go ahead and remove our straining bags with our basically spent fruit. We then want to turn around later on down the road periodically. We want to do rackings, which is basically transferring everything above what will be the developing leaf layer at the bottom into our secondary carboy, and doing that periodically until our wine becomes clear. I usually go by 9 to 12 months. I would then begin the process of degassing. I'll back sweeten it, I'll pasteurize it, I'll bottle it, cork it, label it, and then at some point I'll begin drinking it. Now, all of these steps you can find as individual videos on my winemaking operations playlist on my channel page. You can check those out at any time. But insofar as this wine is concerned, next time we see this will be 12 months hence when we do the 12-month tasting. See how it turned out. So until then, hey, if you like what you see here, please click on that to notify, subscribe button. become a member or become a Patreon. Help support this channel out. So I'll see you. Okay, it's been 12 months since I first started making this wild blueberry wine. Uh, I usually use 12 months. It's kind of an arbitrary figure. I mean, you can drink your wine much sooner or much later. It's entirely up to you. I used to do 6-month tastings, but realized that that was just wasting what could be a perfectly good bottle of wine later on down the road, so I don't do those anymore. But hey, it's done, technically. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. A few particulars. Born 8/23/2023. ABV came in at 13.13%. It's been back sweetened and it's been pasteurized. And of course, if anyone who watches this channel knows by now, the reason why I pasteurize my wine is because I don't use sulfites to stop fermentation, when I can just simply put everything in a pot and turn the stove on and let it come up to temperature, and that's that. Works quite well. One other particular, I'm sure for those of you who've got 4K Ultra HD TVs, big screen version, yes, I did misspell blueberry. I was in a rush, didn't feel like sticking in another sheet of labels and reprinting it, so hey, it's spelled B-U-L-E, berry wine. But enough said for that. Let's go ahead and crack this bad boy open. Okay. All right. Thoughts? All right. Before I get into the actual tasting, a few other particulars. All the intermediate steps, just drew a blank here. The bottling, the back sweetening, the pasteurization, all of the other steps you can find as standalone videos in my winemaking operations channel page if you want to check those out. But basically, those steps are the same for pretty much all wines and meats that I've done on this channel, which is why you don't see me doing each and every one of those steps on each and every one of my videos. All right, that having been said, let's see what we got here. You can smell blueberries. You can also smell that alcohol. That is good. Smooth. The wine is more or less clear. There's a slight overall haze. I mean, there's no sediment on the bottom, but it's clear enough. If I can get it to go down the right pipe. Okay. It's not very nice, smooth flavor. I back sweetened it pretty well. Was that a month ago? Yeah, it was about a month ago when I bottled this. The reason why I don't indicate how much actual sugar that I use to back sweeten it is because, hey, when you back sweeten your wine, you can back sweeten it as dry or as sweet as you want. It's entirely up to you. I think I did a good job. My taste buds agree. This is pretty good. Ooh. I like to have this chilled. It's actually okay, room temperature. It's not overpowering at all in terms of flavor. Good. It's not bitter. It's not too astringent. I think the acidity was just right. Yeah, this actually turned out pretty well. Don't think I'll be making any changes to the original recipe, which you should be able to find in the description section of the video once I put it on there. But overall, yeah, it's turned out pretty well. Yeah, it's turned out pretty good. Yeah, this will be one of the ones that I'll set aside for my son to enjoy when if he ever comes down to visit. Funny when you get old and your children don't want to visit you. They got other things to do. But that's okay. Good. I like this. Yeah, I like this. Um, yeah, it's a pretty good. It's a good flavor. It's not overpowering. There's not too many blackberries. Not too many blueberries in the mix. I don't know if these being wild blueberries makes a big of a difference, but uh, yeah, I can see. I won't say that I can see making this again because I've already made this again. It's actually the second time I've made blueberry wine. First time using no, it's third time. First time I used frozen blueberries. Second time I used fresh. These were frozen. To me, it doesn't really matter. It just depends on how much money I've got and whether or not the fruit's in season or not. But yeah, this is when you can sit back and enjoy. And again, at only 13.13%, mine came out that way. Yeah, it's one that you can sit back and enjoy. Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna try this one chilled later on. But again, this is a string of winners. I know I've got about 8 batches remaining that I have to do tasting videos on. I'm sure at least one of those is going to be kind of questionable. So we'll see how those go. But again, if you want to try frozen wild blueberry wine, or if you've got a field of wild blueberries growing around somewhere, you want to just go ahead and grab those, or if you just got blueberries in general, go ahead and give it a shot. I think it's well worth the time and effort. So, if you like what you see here, just go ahead and click on that subscribe button. I'll be around at least till the end of the year, 2020, 2024. Yeah, I think the last one is in December. And I'll see you in the next video.